Hello, thank you everyone so much for joining us today for the 2022 Early College Convening. This session is Credits with a Purpose, Collaboration and Design to Avoid Excess Credit session. We would like to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded and will be posted on the event website. Please keep your cameras off and your microphones muted throughout the session if you do not want to be on the recording. Artificial intelligence will be providing live caption for accessibility. Captions may not always be accurate to what is being said, but they will be corrected for the recording. Recordings are resources will be posted to the site between 3 and 4 weeks after today's presentation. If you have any questions for the presenters today, please add them in the chat box. I'm Stacy Higgins, the moderator, and I will share the questions with the speakers, or they can see them too, and we can go through the questions as we go. So please join me in welcoming today Amy Hubbard, Executive Director of Early College, University of Maine System, and Mercedes Poor, Director of College Access and Secondary Partnerships at Maine Community College System.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm Amy.
And I am Mercedes, and we are so thrilled to be with you today. Amy, do you want to give them a little bit of just what your role is at the university system, and then I'll do mine at the Maine Community College System?
Great, sure. So as the Executive Director of Early College at the University of Maine System, I oversee all of the early college programs at all 7 of our universities. And early college in Maine really is an umbrella term. It refers to all forms of early college, so any program in which a high school student takes a college class while they're still in high school. So this could include courses taken online, courses taken in our high schools, or also courses where students go to our universities or community colleges to take place. So some of the things that I've been tasked with is working towards NACEP accreditation. I'm also responsible for helping all 7 of our institutions align our policies and procedures to make it easier in service to students and the state and our stakeholders, so that the process is much easier for our school counselors, for parents to navigate, to provide additional resources and support. So all of our institutions have worked very closely together to align where possible while still maintaining each individual niche that the universities may serve.
And so I am Amy's counterpart on the community college side. So in the state of Maine, we just want to give you a little bit of background because we're a little different than Hawaii. We have the university system. They have 7 universities. And then we have the community college system, and we have 7 colleges. We don't have any state colleges in between. It's just the universities and the community colleges in terms of public institutions. So what we have in the state of Maine is a very generous program. And we need you to hear that background just so that you understand some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. In the state of Maine, our Maine Department of Education is in charge of the Aspirations Program. And the Aspirations Program is a statute that gives every public high school student in Maine the chance to take 12 college credits completely tuition free. So the state of Maine is going to pay for that. And they're going to pay for that in both a concurrent sense. So that is courses offered inside a high school or a career and technical center and taught by a credentialed high school or CTE faculty member. And I know this is a little bit different than how it works in Hawaii. So you can either use those 12 credits in your concurrent course taking or what we call dual enrollment. So that's when it's like your running start program. So when students take a college or university course either on campus or online. It's a very generous program. And what we have done over the past 5 years, actually a little longer than that now, is start to work together to increase equity and access across Maine's universities and community colleges. So we've done some things in Maine that are a little bit unique. We both went to an open access system so that there are no more just basement requirements for taking an acuplacer or taking an SAT to get into any course without a prerequisite. We also eliminated fees in both of our systems. So the aspirations program comes in and pays for tuition. And then what used to happen around 2014, 2015 is the students would have to pay any additional fees. We both convinced our systems to get rid of those additional fees for all of our early college students. So we in some ways, although we're small, we have an open access policy for any course without a prerequisite, where the school counselors are giving recommendations. We have eliminated any excess fees beyond those first 12 credits that the state is paying for. And one of the things you're going to see as we move through our slides are we've also gone to a joint application processing system. And this was very significant for us to manage those 12 credits. So before I get started, we'll make sure, Amy, are you seeing Stacy's slides?
I only see them off to the side. Oh, here we go. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah. The only thing I wanted to add to what Mercedes was sharing is just to put the context of Maine, we are facing a demographic shift. So we have fewer students. It's actually a demographic cliff. And so there's increased competition for those fewer students. And we have, as we mentioned, 14 community colleges and universities. So that's a lot of access, a lot of institutions, but fewer students. So there's a couple ways that we could have approached this. We could be competing with each other, or we could work together in service to students, in service of the state. And as you'll see, we chose to work together. So I think we're ready for the next slide. So one of the prominent and very first researchers in this space, Nancy Hoffman from Jobs for the Future, I love this quote. It doesn't really matter how many credits you leave high school with, it's how many you start college with. And that's something that's really important to think about as you're trying to craft and design these programs. Students can rack up all these credits, but if they don't generate credits that are usable on a student's university transcript, it's a lot of resources. I can see that in Hawaii, you have universities, there's scholarships available, sometimes parents pay, and then sometimes high schools pay. So you really want to make sure that those courses are intentional. I've recently seen in the upcoming NASEP seminars, they call it a buffet of courses that students can choose their courses from a buffet. And so this was something that Mercedes and I started to notice when we started working together, was that that's what our students were doing. And prior to this application system where we shared, we really didn't know if students were taking classes at the university and community college until the very end, when the bill was sent to the Department of Education. And then the Department of Ed would come back and say, yeah, this student had 20 credits. So not only were they going over the 12 allotted, but they might be taking courses that really didn't make any sense from an academic program standpoint. We'll jump into that a little bit more later.
Yeah. So I think we can hit our next slide, Stacy, and get into kind of some of the context for what was going on when Amy and I really started working together, and what was going on in the field as well. Because what we're going to be talking about a lot today was something like Amy said, we were seeing these students take lots of credits, and they were credits across the curriculum. And it was done not out of any bad things that were going on. It was just the credits were available and the students were taking them. We also had school counselors who would say, I'm going to try to get my kids as many free college credits as they can get. And that was kind of some of the things that we were seeing as we began to work together. I think the context was happening as nationally we started having these same conversations. NASEP is one of the things that brings us together. It's honestly what connected us with Hawaii for today's session. NASEP really beginning as the accrediting body for a lot of that concurrent enrollment. And for a long time, it was about, let's get kids this opportunity. And that was awesome. But what we're seeing is lots of kids are having lots of opportunities. And now we really have to make sure that those opportunities are structured in such a way that this activity is sustainable, it actually leads to better student outcomes, and that we have kind of a coherent policies going through all of this. So it's not just that buffet or that shotgun approach to early college credit. We also were able to hear from different people who were starting to do work around excess credit. And excess credit are those credits that students take. And what we were starting to see, and I saw John Fink from the Community College Research Center do another one of these, where students who were completing a 60 credit associate's degree actually had 84 credits, or students who were completing a 120 credit bachelor's degree actually had 140 credits. So you're starting to see that these credits were being taken but not always being used. And that gets problematic, especially when you start to bring those programs to scale. So we were seeing lots of activity beyond that kind of 15 credit threshold. And now you're starting to talk about a second semester freshman, or actually a freshman who's coming in as a sophomore. And you're starting to think about all of those things. And the other thing that really started to stand out was this theme of who's taking these credits, who's taking lots and lots of credits. And the reality is, especially while we still had standardized testing in place, especially when we still had fees in place, where a lot of these credits were going to students who were already college bound. They already had that in their plan, and they were taking these credits and these opportunities not to jumpstart their college trajectory, but to pad their resume so that they could get into more competitive colleges. And so even though it was called the aspiration statute, it wasn't always leading toward aspirations. And so we sat down in, I think, 2017, 2018, I forget when it was, and really tried to say, okay, let's put our competitive nature aside and really see what we can do as responsible stewards of the state's aspirations program to make sure that students are taking credits with purpose and that we both are going to abide by the things that we agree to. Stacey, if you could switch us to the next one, and we'll start to get into some of the things that we knew we had to give some structure to this because we were talking to school counselors who really know high school, but we're trying to guide students into lots of different kinds of colleges. We really had to talk about college to students who were in high school because they were taking enough credits to be a college student. We would never have let a college freshman take that many credits without connecting with an advisor, and yet we had that happening across all of our early college opportunities. So we devised 3 reasons to take early college credits with purpose, and the first one being transferability. And so, Stacey, if you could bring us into our next one, and we'll have Amy start us off.
And before I jump into transferability, I just wanted to mention the good and bad of the way that our system works now. Is the good is that we, with our open access policy, we let students basically take any course that they've met the prerequisite for. So that is wonderful. But if you imagine 7 universities and now 7 community colleges, that means that students have access to thousands of courses. So that's really good, except it's also, can you imagine if you're a high school student, maybe 16, 17 years old, and you go into, maybe take English, and there's, 12 different names of English, 12 different descriptions. So it does make it sort of like the good and the bad of having that open access policy and allowing students to basically take anything that they want to take. So in the University of Maine system, some of the issues with transferability is it's really determined by the receiving college. So if a student takes a course with us, with the University of Maine system, and then transfers those courses into our system, that's a little bit, a lot more likely actually for those courses to transfer. But we can't promise transferability, particularly we have an issue in Maine. We have lots of we'll say Ivy League or high-level universities that sometimes don't accept our credits. And it also depends on the program that students are entering. So some examples are, for example, an engineering program may not accept a high school physics course if it's taught in the high school at some of these universities, but they may accept a physics course if it's taught by the university professor. So sometimes we run into some issues of those. We also found issues with excess electives and courses outside programs. So we had a student who wanted to major in psychology, so she took an intro to psych course, but after she took an additional 100 level psych course. Now that may be interesting to that student because psychology was of interest to her, but a psych elective at the 100 level would not count towards a psych program. So that's just another example of the importance of advising as students are considering their course selection. So fortunately, the early college administrator picked up on that and said that would not have counted towards your major. And again, that would be sort of what we call those stranded credits.
Yeah. I think this is important too, because I think when you talk to policymakers or you talk to principals, it's often, well, let's get students this head start. Let's see if we can get some of those gen ed credits done. And that is a great thing to talk about. The bummer being that you never know where a student is going to end up. So we have to be really careful about how we talk about those things. Like Amy said, that is ultimately determined by the receiving campus. And even if it is something that I'm pretty sure is going to transfer, I need to always make sure I'm telling the student or telling the family, I'm pretty sure this is going to transfer, but we need to make sure about this with your college. Or if you go to another school, I can never guarantee that unless, of course, you do have clear articulations, which is what we're trying to build. This becomes especially important when you have students taking classes across their high school curriculum and across their career and technical curriculum, because often those two things, they're going to look all like college credits, but that's especially when we were getting into trouble, where I'd have students taking a full welding slate over at their career and technical center, and then their high school was putting them in things like history, college algebra, and English comp. The reality being, if you come to one of my welding programs, I don't have any room for that history or that college algebra. I'll bring that in as your math, but that college algebra is really not going to help you. You needed technical math. You needed applied math. And so we have this situation where, yes, the student has the credit, but it's not really the content that would have been right for that program. So that's what we were starting to see, and trying to make sure that we were putting this information out in a digestible way. So one of the solutions we had was to put it out in a digestible way and really try to get our colleges to front load some of our programs and certificates. So Stacy, if you can change the slide, we'll see what some of that looks like. And I'll let Amy bring us through the university ones.
Sure. So I'm showing the University of Maine at Machias because they were the first to do this. And what the University of Maine at Machias did, this was actually driven by the academic program. So they jumped onto this idea right away. They were really pioneers in the space. And each academic program went through and selected what are the 4 or 5 first courses that a student in our program would want to take. And then other institutions, like you can see University of Maine as an example, did the same and followed. And you can see that there's some program requirements. So they're giving students a taste of this is what you're going to have to take. And then there's general education requirements so students can dabble. And this is where the balance comes in. We often hear folks say, well, what about student exploration? This is an opportunity to explore their careers. And in many ways it is, because this is a good space for a student to take those introductory classes and say, I don't like this. I think that's okay, because then they realize I don't like this in high school before they choose a college based on that pathway or begin that pathway and maybe get into their second semester freshman year or first semester sophomore year and realize this really isn't for me. So it's a really nice way to kind of take a little bit of a little sampling. One of our newer up-and-coming institutions, the University of Farmington, just rolled out an Introduction to Education course and an Intro to Education pathway, and they designed a course specifically for early college students. And then I made it clear in terms of NACEP, it really has to be something that would count towards an academic program. So if a student at University of Farmington took that course would it count towards their academic program? And they realized there was a need for their own students, that someone may be interested in education but doesn't necessarily want to jump right into that education major. What a great way, intro to education, an overview course. And if that student again chooses that's not their path, it would still count within the gen ed because it's in their academic program. So those are a couple of examples. So in a way, it was the University of Maine, Machias led by faculty, and then the University of Maine, it was really led by the early college office, which is embedded in an academic program at our institutions. All of our programs are embedded within the academic departments, but they basically looked at the program studies and picked those courses. So then they brought it to the departments just to get a rubber stamp, but it was really hard for those departments to say anything because it really is aligned to their programs.
Yeah, and we did something similar. Stacey, if you could change the slide. And this is something that we did locally, where we really were trying to get students to stay within the classes that would transfer, particularly when they were working with their career and technical education centers. This is the example of something we did locally, where one college, they're a huge health science college, so they have a lot of our competitive health degrees, including nursing. We put this out in front of 3 CTEs, and this progression, one is offered mostly in the high school and the CTE, ensures students are on a path, but also if they complete this, one, sets them up for acceptance into our nursing or our competitive health programs, and two, gives them an actual certificate that is a recognized industry credential, so they can also walk away with that. So they can walk away with that as long as they take one summer class. So we were very interested in making sure that they were set up to either enter a competitive program or put something on their resume. And I see a question here about when a student becomes a freshman. That's exactly what we were having trouble with, and we'll talk about that later, because we were having these half freshmen come in. They had a lot of their gen eds done, or worse, a lot of their program classes done, but not enough credits to actually be a sophomore and not enough credits to actually move on. The other thing that we started to see, and this is what gets a little scary and very serious very quickly, is the concept of students getting into financial aid trouble. This is complicated, and we had to find a way to talk to high school students and CTEs about this without being overbearing, but also making sure they understood the gravity of the situation. So, as many of you know who work in colleges and universities, all of our students who accept federal financial aid have to abide by satisfactory academic progress. This is a good thing. We want this. We don't want someone to just stay in college forever, racking up lots of useless credits and changing majors and still getting their federal financial aid for years. We actually want students to make progress toward a credential. The bummer is that it doesn't matter. That clock starts when that student starts taking college classes. So we had a lot of students taking college classes and then, and this is key, matriculating to the same school that offered those credits. Because in order to make SAP, satisfactory academic progress, you have to pass a certain number of your credits, and you have to stay on track toward that program. You get 150% of your degree. You need to be moving forward. And if you have too many credits extraneous to your program, you get in SAP trouble. If you have too many unsuccessful grades, you get into SAP trouble. And what we're going to show you is a couple of examples of that. But both of those things can actually jeopardize your federal financial aid. And here's the ringer. Think about who is most likely to stay local and matriculate to the same school that offered those early college credits. Think about who actually needs federal financial aid in order to move through college. You're talking about jeopardizing those students for whom early college opportunities, all of this early dual credit, can be most transformative. So we were actually putting students in federal financial aid jeopardy when those were the very students who relied most on federal financial aid. If you're going to pay cash for your college degree, you don't care about SAP. But for those who don't have that money and are going to stay and attend their local community college, SAP matters drastically. We also had this question came up. The other thing that we started to see was that students weren't able to be full time, which means they weren't able to accept their full Pell Grant and they weren't able to live on campus. They weren't able to accept their full loan because they weren't able to get to full time. Especially in the community college world, our programs work in cohorts. So if you've taken Precision Machining 1 and a little bit of electives, you don't have something to take when you arrive on your campus in the fall because you've taken all your gen eds, and Precision Machining 2 doesn't start until the spring. So again, I'm delaying your start of college instead of advancing you and encouraging you to move quickly through your degree. We were not set up to receive all of these students. And that was kind of on us. If we change to the next slide, I'll actually show you this so you know I'm not making it up. So this is a transcript and I've hid some of it. And what you see here, it's not perfect, it's not a great example, but if you look up ahead, this is a student who took early college credit and then went to that same school, went to that same college when they matriculated. So you see an early college comp with a C minus. You see an intro to lit, which why someone let them take intro to lit after they got a C minus in college comp, I don't know. They got a D plus. And then college algebra, they got a C plus. Here's a rub. This is a student who wants to get into nursing. So these grades actually hurt them. They shouldn't have taken these classes. And what you see below is that when they actually got onto campus, they didn't do too badly. And they did a great job in that college composition class. But now they have excess credit on their transcript. And you can see them there. They didn't go for the college algebra. They went back to take the elements of mathematics. Those first three classes, instead of helping them, are going to hurt them in terms of their federal financial aid. So that's the kind of thing that we were trying to avoid. And we can go to the next slide there. And Amy, I'll let you start that one off.
And I just wanted to jump in to kind of dovetail some of the examples that Mercedes was sharing. The community colleges have, it's definitely more tricky for students because they have fewer credits. But this did happen at our universities with certain programs. So for example, with nursing, in order to be full-time, when we had students doing that, where we talked about a buffet or random acts of dual enrollment, or they just took all of their gen eds, it was really hard for a student to be full-time in a nursing program because they would have to take all nursing courses. I've heard recently similar in the engineering program. So your students don't really want to take all those heavy duty, the calculus, the physics, all those heavy duty engineering courses, but they had to because they had met all of their gen ed and other requirements. So in order to complete the program, to enroll full-time, they had to take all of those heavy content classes. So there's definitely some unintended consequences with these random acts of dual enrollment. In terms of success, so researchers Ann and Taylor conducted a review of empirical studies, and they looked at hundreds of studies on dual and concurrent enrollment, or what we call early college. And it really didn't matter in terms of modality, but really all that it mattered for student success, all of the benefits that we tout for students, so more likely to attend college, have higher grades, more likely to persist, more likely to graduate, all the wonderful things, why we all support these programs, and hopefully you can tell with passion. It doesn't really matter how many classes students take. All they need in order to realize these benefits was 1 to 2 courses. So the researchers refer to this as dosage. So more is not necessarily better. Now here we are saying students could take courses in a pathway, and that's definitely a better option. But really, students really just need that experience to gain that confidence, to have that success, to know that they can do well. And so for some of those students, it's really just that one to two courses. So in many ways, less can be more.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I think Velma's has a great point there. That student should have retaken that course, especially if they were trying to get into a competitive program. You are absolutely right. It's just that example of how taking it early may have some consequences that we're not thinking about, when the student is in high school. And I'll be real honest with you, almost every student is going to goof up and make a mistake. And that's why there's a little bit of wiggle room inside your SAP eligibility. The bummer is when we burn that goof up kind of cushion while the kids are still in high school, and then they don't know that. And so when they do get into college and they still have that goof up, or they change their major, they lose a little of that wiggle room within their SAP eligibility. And that's the danger. Now, I think you're raising a good point here, though, because it's like, this is only going to happen to a teeny tiny percentage of our kids. But is it those kids for whom that is the final blow and it knocks them off the college course? And I think that's what I really don't like, is that so much of this is, if you're coming in with privilege and you're coming in with a little bit more kind of cultural knowledge, you're going to do fine no matter what happens. But if you're not, and you're taking advantage of this and you're saying, this is going to help me get into college, and it actually does the opposite, that's when we've really failed. And I think that's some of the stuff. That's why we were trying to contextualize this for our counselors and our students, so that we didn't have students taking more and more, like Amy was talking about, but really trying to say, let's try to make sure you have a bite size of this, so that you figure out if you really like this, and then let's help you move forward with intention, rather than just let's eat the entire buffet. The other thing that we were seeing is this idea, and it kind of goes back to the last example. Again, and you guys all know this, if you transfer those early college credits, they're just going to come in as T's. The grade won't come. But if you go to the same institution and you have those unsatisfactory grades or those unsuccessful grades, those grades come with you. So we were seeing students coming onto campus, and they just graduated from high school and they're on academic probation. So they just started college and they're on academic probation. And you say, no, that can't be true, Mercedes. And I say, I'm going to show you a transcript in 2 seconds that proves that it happens. But again, who was getting into trouble with that was the most disturbing piece, because it was those students for whom that local college was their only choice, and they didn't have a choice to pick from, the 5. The other way that this can get, and again, we just have to be thoughtful in terms of the amount that students are taking and how successful they are as they go through. It can jeopardize program acceptance. So if you have those early unsuccessful credits and you try to take them into a competitive program and you're not ready for that, again, that can set you up for an unsuccessful attempt, where if you had maybe waited or said, I took one course and I didn't do so well, I'm going to stop taking courses, that's probably a better way to go. So I think it all rolls into that. And so Stacy, if you could slip that, let's show this next tran. And you'll see, here's a student who takes a survey of A&P, withdraws, takes technical math, gets a C-, takes college comp, and again withdraws. And this was given to me by one of my staff members, because she said, what am I going to do? This kid is coming here and they're already in jeopardy of being thrown out, because they're already under a 2.0. And because the student is attending the same school that offered the credit, those are real grades. And those are, you see both the SAP trouble there, because we've got some W's, and you see the student coming in with a 1.67. So they're starting, instead of me advancing them beyond the start line and giving them a head start, I've moved them back from the start line. So the good part is, though, I had to dig to find these transcripts, because once the university system and the community college system started working together and we could see credits across a student's entire portfolio, we actually put in a policy right around the time that these trans are coming in that says you are not allowed to take another early college course if you have an unsuccessful attempt at one. So we actually put in a policy that said you can't take more credits if you earn an W or an F or a D. They can always get around that by appealing, but we were seeing too much of this. We also had to dig to find kind of those credits that were shotgunning, because now we can intervene sooner. It's not perfect, but it's getting better because of the collaboration across the two systems, and some of the intention that we tried to put in early. And so before our colleges even started to do some of this, we were trying to say, let's try to get the kids on paths with intention. It's great to explore, but it's not great to explore over 30 credits because you start to get into trouble. Stacy, if you could switch, and we'll let Amy see if there's anything else she wants to add to that or how we did this.
So one of the things I wanted to share, just an example, a positive example of when this works and a good relationship between a high school and a university. And that happens when the high schools build in these pathways into their own curricula. And so we do have one University of Maine, the University of Southern Maine worked closely with a regional high school, Gorham High School. And if you look at Gorham High School's program of studies, they have different tracks for students where these pathways are built into those tracks. And I think that's a really good example of how what the universities and community colleges are building can trickle down to our high school partners, and also a way for those high school partners to build their curricula around what is expected of the universities. It's really a good example of bridging that gap. So this resource that you see in front of you is something that Mercedes and I designed. Again, it was probably 2018 when we realized, again, as I mentioned, balancing students exploring possible majors and then offering space at the same time for career exploration. We also wanted to recognize and show students that you can join a certain field, you can explore a certain field, but your options and your possible career choices are going to depend on whether you choose to pursue that at the community college or the university system. And I think also by doing this, it shows that we're trying to reach all of students in Maine so that they could see themselves as either community college or university material, or you can also switch between both. And I think that was something that was really important to us. How we did this is that we do have a tool from an external party in our state that summarizes all of the options in the state. So we looked at those, we looked at the options across all of our campuses and colleges and universities, and we said, let's pick the ones that are more relevant, that are high interest to students, and that we had overlap. So you can see the fields that we chose. You probably can't see this, but it is linked to the session. So feel free to download and use those materials. But you can see, I want to fix things and solve problems. So for the community college side, you have some of those technical paths, electrician, plumber, welding, where on the university side, engineering, biology and things like that. Also in terms of criminal justice and those types of programs. I'm interested in health and people and animals. So that could be your nursing or health professions track. I want to work with students, of course. That's an important one. We have, I'm sure, the situation is similar in Hawaii. We have we're struggling right now with teacher credentialing and having teachers leave the field and not entering the field of teaching. So really encouraging students to pursue those as well. And so what we did was we came up with this resource. We also packaged the other resources that you've seen and that were in the presentation notes, and we mailed them to every single high school in the state. So we literally sat there and hand stuffed these envelopes. We created posters, we created brochures, and sent this to all of our institutions, recognizing that it is a shared responsibility. And this is not training that all of our school counselors probably have, or if they had training in this, they really don't have time because they're working so closely with students. And there's a lot of actual counseling that takes place, social, emotional, that the counselors really don't always have time. So we thought that it was our responsibility to share this information, provide tools to our counselors to help them navigate the process. And then we, of course, posted these on our websites so that we could also help guide students and parents. It's definitely something that we're not presenting to you as perfect and finished. I'd love to say we checked that box. We mailed these out, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But as you can imagine, the world is a different place and it's probably time to revisit. And we've had a lot of turnover at our school. So who knows where those brochures and posters are? Are these course of studies still relevant based on the changing world that we're faced with? Probably not. And we need to really sit down and remap and revisit our schools and kind of reiterate this, especially with the pandemic, where we did have a lot of schools tell us that it made the programs more accessible to more students, and a lot more students chose to take classes online. It was almost a way for students to realize that they could take classes online. So that's good. But again, we need to revisit to make sure that our schools are on the right page.
Yeah. And I will say too, like when we did this, when we collaborated on this, the beauty was our colleges. So Amy and I both work at the system level. Our colleges followed with specific local pathways and real partnerships with the local schools around the local colleges and universities. And that was beautiful. And yet we're still also working in concert. The collaboration, we don't have a governing body across, our K-12 and then our colleges and universities. So the collaboration is really one of the willing. But I think the beauty has been that we've all agreed that if you put the student's interest at the center, then we're going to do the right thing. And that has kind of been our guiding lodestar, because we should be competing for students and competing for resources. But when we say, no, we're going to do what's best for the students and best for the students of Maine, because we need more of them to go on to college, that becomes the thing that we all agree on. And that's where these pathways come in. But Amy's right. It's time to do Maine Pathways 2.0. One, build on what the colleges and universities have done. And then as we've had a teacher shortage or turnover after COVID, we've also had school counselor turnover. So we've got a lot of new people, again, coming out with great school counseling skills, but they're not college advisors because that's not their job. So we need to lean in with our resources where appropriate and just make sure that everyone is aware that it's not just free credit, a la carte, buffet, whatever you want, but we really have to do these things with intention, and make sure we're doing right by the kids, whatever their goals are. Ivy League or welding certificate, we want to make sure that each of them have the opportunity to do whatever their goal is.
And in the interest of not saying that we're doing it perfectly, I can give an example, particularly since the community college system and the university, we share the application system. So some of these savvy students, savvy parents, probably behind the scenes on the computer, they want to take a psychology or a sociology course or an English comp, something that's really popular. So they'll apply for one of those sections at every single institution. And so we'll look at a student's application and there's 14 psychology courses that student has applied for. And so it's educating our partners as well that they need to narrow things down. So even just within our own system, it just doesn't fix everything. But that's also an opportunity for us to work with our school counselors to explain why it's not okay for that school counselor to approve all 14 of those applications. I do see the question from Glenn about would their transcript be affected if they don't pass a concurrent course. So if they take a concurrent course, for us, that's in their high school, taught by a high school teacher, and they don't earn the credit, they do generate a permanent transcript regardless of success. And that is part of NASAP accreditation. So that's a standard that we have to treat those courses as if they were a university, the student attends at the university. So we're required to do that. Now, if they matriculate at a different institution, that wouldn't necessarily affect their GPA at that institution, but it would if they matriculate to the same institution. So that's where we have to be really cognizant, very cautious about who we approve to take these courses within our open access policy. But I will share that since the university system joined the community college system in our open access policy, our success rates did not differ very significantly. It was like 93%, 92%, 91% at the height of COVID. So having that open access policy really hasn't increased our rate of students withdrawing and dropping and damaging their transcript. On the other hand, 9% of our students, our numbers are rising. That is significant, and what happens to those students is something that we're working on. It's a work in progress for sure. Yep. We're ready for the next slide. Is that this?
Yeah, what's our next slide here?
Okay, yeah, the ideal pathways example.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can just explain this quickly, and I know you probably can't read it, but what you're looking at, I typed the name of the courses. So this is sort of the perfect. So becoming a business professional at Machias, and you can see a broad range of courses, from your gen eds to some more specific courses. I did highlight the introduction to sports management. This is a good example of where our universities working together can benefit students, because Machias said, well, we'll transfer that sports management class, even though it's offered at a different university, into our pathway program. So maybe the student has an interest in sports, but Machias doesn't offer that course. So this is the ideal. I do know of a student who took this pathway and matriculated to a private institution, and they're going to be able to get their MBA, Master's of Business Administration, in 4.5 years instead of 5 years. So it did shave a whole semester off of their MBA program, because this private institution offers sort of a business management track, and if you can matriculate early into the master's program. So it's a good way to accelerate. And we also know of situations where the early college courses do build a buffer for students, so that when they do maybe change their major or need to drop classes for any reason, they still have that benefit of making satisfactory academic progress, because they already had those classes under their belts when they started the program.
Yeah. And going back to the KV Health Science Certificate I displayed earlier, we are actually taking that certificate and extending it across all of our campuses, so that nursing is a competitive program in Maine in our community colleges. And usually you come to college, you take your prereqs, and then you sit and wait and try to get into nursing. The students coming with that certificate done through early college credits, if they're successful, are able to enter the nursing realm, enter that RN right from high school, direct from high school, and come out as an RN that much sooner. I don't know about Hawaii, but Maine, we have a serious nursing shortage. So that is something that business and industry is very interested in. The state is very interested in. We want these students to move through these programs as quickly as that we can, as long as we're also maintaining that, the standards and all of that we have to do for nursing degrees. And this is a way we've been able to kind of reshape what it means to come to a community college and get your RN, in a way that's good for just about everybody who it touches. So it's one of those ways that also shows you the possibility of what a state can do with early credit. Where we have log jams, let's see if we can rework those with this program. So that's what we're trying to do across the state, is really make sure this is working for students and working for the state of Maine as well. We don't have the greatest college matriculation rate, especially after COVID. So this is it's almost like we're starting anew again. And we're happy to work with the university partners on that.
I think we're at the last slide. Is that right, Stacey? You just
we are.
Okay. So if you want to, maybe, the folks have access to that. But I'm just thinking this might be a good chance for additional questions. And I just wanted to add what Mercedes was talking about with respect to our systems working together, that this was not a smooth transition when we decided to share an application portal. Mercedes and I both took a lot of heat, I guess you could say gently, from our institutions that thought, the sky's going to fall. We're going to lose all of our enrollment. My folks said we're going to lose it to the community college system. Community college system folks said the same thing. And now what's happening is a lot more cross collaboration, and my folks will not hesitate to reach out to some of the community college side. Students and counselors and parents don't really know the difference. So they reach out sometimes to me if they have a question, and then I route it to the right person, or they really work closely with University of Maine at Augusta, so they just reach out to that team, and that team will work with Mercedes' team. So I will say that even though we just went ahead despite the consternation and pushback that we got, it is actually working very well. And the other thing is that our schools and our counselors don't try to play us against each other. And so I think that's also important, that we need to, as we work towards NACEP accreditation or using the NACEP standards as best practices, we need to hold our schools accountable to understand that these are university transcripted credits and must be treated that way. And we have to operate our programs in alignment with that.
Not seeing too many questions come in. I will also say, I think our contact information, I did. Oh, interesting. We don't really have a lot of sports in the community college world. Amy, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if that's impacted student athletes. I know within early college itself, we see more of our student athletes taking the current concurrent enrollment classes, or we do offer programs in the summer so that they can balance that with their high school schedule. I'm not sure in terms of playing time in college. I'm assuming that would really refer to Division I, where the rules are really strict. Not so much for maybe Division II and Division III, but that's an interesting question.
Yeah, because I think they have the same kind of credit. You have to be in so many credits. You can't just be. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
you guys are more sporty than we are.
Well, thank you, Amy and Mercedes, so much for coming today and sharing all the great stuff you guys are doing in Maine. Like I said, the recordings and everything will be available along with the resources. Thank you for joining the session today, and we will see you guys all tomorrow at the other sessions. We're going to enjoy another day of sessions tomorrow. So if there's no more questions, I'd like to give you the rest of your days, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining, and feel free to reach out.
Yeah, please do.